One of the topics I often hear discussed in miniature painting is whether you should strip your old minis or not. People will say stuff about wanting to do the sculpt justice or wanting to redo an old paint job now that they've progressed in their skill set as a painter. Well, I'm here to tell you that you do not need to strip your old minis. In fact, I think you should keep them as a relic of history. You see, when you're looking back at some of your old models, you get a really concrete example of some of the skills that you've developed and how you've progressed as a painter overall. And so that's what we'll do today. I'll pull up a picture of one of my older paint jobs in Procreate, and we'll discuss some of the changes that I would like to make to the paint job if I were to do the same thing today. I'll show all of these edits and explain how to do them with the paintbrush. This is also very similar to what I do for the highest tier over on my Patreon, but we'll talk more about that a little bit later on in the video. So let's open up Procreate and have a look at one of my older paint jobs. So what we're seeing here, I think, is a very valiant attempt at a paint job. I think we have some very good imagination going on. Things like the lighting that comes from below here. This stuff I really like, the sort of green. We can certainly try to push it. I like it because we have it up here as well. There's something there to work with. What I don't like as much is this yellow that we're seeing on the belt buckle and on the pipe as well. I think it falls outside of the general color composition, and it's something that I would want to change looking at it now. I also think in general for this OSL effect that we're seeing in the middle here from the book, this sort of bluish light that is both on the staff and on the owl and on the wizard's face, brim of the hat as well. I think for that to work, we are going to have to be a little bit more brave and have a little bit more intention with it. In general, for the OSL to really work, we're going to have some stronger shadows. And I think this piece is really missing something on the shadow side. So let's see if we can try to fix that. So we have this reddish brown here in the shadows, but because we're dealing with so much of the OSL, I think let's go ahead and put on a multiply layer and just try to put in some sort of on some of these details on the wooden branch here. So the planes that are facing upwards needs to have shadows, whereas the planes that are facing towards the green light coming from below should have more of the light. Yeah, so that's kind of the underside of it. I'm also seeing like just some sloppy areas inside here around the hand where we could also have some occlusion. I think a big theme in all of these different paintings is sort of the lack of painting hands very well or painting the occlusion shadow. It's certainly something that I needed to work on at this point in my painting. So we have to remember that in order for the OSL to work, we have to have a very dark environment. So when we have multiple light sources, as this, what we're seeing here, we really have to make sure that we have some strong shadows to balance all these different lights and make them read as lights. So since we're talking about the green down here, I think it would be good to maybe go ahead and change the color of the gold a little bit. It really does not work for me, this yellow here. So I think if we tone down just some of the saturation and darken some parts a little bit, already it feels more like gold and less kind of yellow. And then we might want to grab the green, which I think we can make a brighter green, and then come in and start to build the OSL. Oh, we're still on the same layer. Let's go ahead and jump over to a new layer since we're really just trying to change the tone here. So again, we're seeing that the planes that are facing upwards in the gold are highlighted as if the light is coming from above, but really in this case we don't have lighting from above. We're trying to, if we have the OSL from underneath, we cannot have the kind of volumetric lighting from above that we're used to doing. And this is something that I often see people struggle with, is that we have that zenithal mindset, and when we go into different lighting scenarios, we kind of tend to fall back to the zenithal light source, even though it's not there in what we're trying to paint. So we put in a little bit more green, and I think we can be braver with it, especially in some of the darker areas here, such as the midtones. So I have to interrupt the painting for a short while to show you something very cool that I've been working on. I've been working with Norlius miniatures on a very special display model that you can get your hands on right now. The model is called Adrift and is sculpted by Leila Khalili. It represents sort of a peaceful search for a home. There's stillness and there's movement, and all the while the miniature carries this sort of inner tranquility. The pre-order launches at a discounted price and will run from today and the next few days. And the first 100 models will have a signed art card by the artist Patricia Santo, and as well as the sculptor Leila Khalili. The model is in 75mm scale, and I think it's an absolute beauty. I totally cannot wait to paint this one. And by the way, Norlius is not paying for this ad here. I just wanted to show this since this is something I've been working with recently. If you're interested in getting this beautiful sculpt, be sure to check out the link down in the description. Now let's get back to the digital painting. So this changes the gold a little bit and makes it less kind of yellow. It screams less yellow. We might even do something that's more saturated and even brighter for the gold here. Since we have the lighting coming from below, we can really punch up the highlights that sit underneath. Something like this. I think that this belt buckle down here now fits the composition way more. And of course, we also need to add some of the same colors. See, I think it's just a little bit too... Oh, that's too much. A little bit too desaturated what I've done here. So if we really want that lighting to pop, we're gonna have to add some contrast and be quite brave with what we have. So especially here on the rod, this kind of wooden rod here, the further down we go, the brighter we might want to make those highlights. So here's another example of, want to make sure to highlight the under edge of the upper indentation here. So something like that is going to help us convey the direction of the light. And we can move in with some of the same lighting here on some of the straps. To make sure we have it. So what I like about this idea, with the light source is that it really helps to convey the form in some of the lower parts of the figure here. It gives some visual interest to the bottom part, which I think is a great idea, but I just think here I needed to be a little bit more courageous with the effort. Again, talking about bravery in each video, I feel like, but here it is. So again, because the arm is essentially a cylinder, so it would run in like a line on the bottom there. You might want to have it here on the shirt as well. I'm just kind of painting it in very loosely. We can go in and blend. Blend it in more and get more of the texture afterwards. Of course, there's also the bottom of the hair here that should also catch a little bit of the lighting. It's hard to see the shape here. Well, that's too strong. There we are. Again, when the lighting comes from below, we really have to kind of switch our way of thinking about it and turn everything upside down. So I think that's better. We still might want to consider it on the book here. And again, as the book bends and goes sort of more in this direction, we'll see that the lighting should fall off and become softer. So I try to concentrate the lighting towards the middle here. And of course, more elegant ways of doing this, but just loosely drawing it in with my pencil here. We can always come back in, blend it, or change the strength of it. So I think we might want to just like clean that up a bit. Always with OSL like this, the question becomes like, how dominant do you want the effect to be? Are you looking for it to be the centerpiece of the story, or is it going to be secondary to the main light source? So here I've certainly got it in, but I'm not sure if it's going to work with the bluer light that we have on top yet. And of course we'll also have to do the same thing for the hands as well, since these are pointing downwards. Something like that, I think it's okay for now. So now we have sort of the bottom part of the figure taken care of, I think, with the green lighting. We've fixed some of the gold and made stronger shadows, really tried to strengthen the OSL. I think what I like about this is that now the bottom part of the figure, like this part down here, can have something together with this part up here, which I think could be just an interesting sort of interplay between the two. So we can try to do that as well. Let's go ahead and grab the same sort of very dark brown we've been using up here. Go back to our shadow adjustment layer. And we can start to paint in some of these stronger shadows and try to do a similar approach to what we have on the bottom of the figure on the top here. Okay, so what you can see that I've changed here is that I've added some of the more saturated greens that we've added in the bottom of the figure as well to the crystal up in the staff here. I've also just, to zoom in a bit, just added some more of the reddish brown tones in order to have that shift from the colder light that comes from the book until the kind of more neutral midtones of the wood itself. So we can add some of these tones as well in the lower parts of the wood just to give it some more contrast. When we're playing with these desaturated tones, we can really just do a lot. So be sure to think about in terms of these contrasts where you can add them. Here we have a contrast of temperature as well as a contrast of value with the colder light, because you can see as we added that reddish brown that the brighter lights that sits down here really pop way more once this part up here has been darkened. So let us move on to looking at the actual face of the OSL here in the center, the colder blue light. The lesson that I'm really trying to convey here is that once we have a light source that has a strong enough temperature or a strong enough value to affect everything that it sees, such as the green part down here, really have to add it everywhere. And you can see very clearly here that I thought about adding the blue in the brim of the hat and on the feathers and on the owl and on the beard, but it is really missing from both this pipe and the skin tone on the face there. So these two are really the elements that make it stand out in such a way that the effect isn't selling. So we can see that by changing this, we should hopefully have a much more convincing OSL in the end. So once we have this blue laid in, we can really just try to lower the opacity a little bit to make it read, I think around there, so we can see the difference in temperature there. Still, this might be a little bit too strong. Maybe something like this is going to shift it more. So I think we have too much of the neutral light on the face still. So the skin tone is in general too pink for the scheme, I think. So here I'm adding in some darker blues into the skin for the shadow areas. This should help to integrate the skin with the rest of the lighting on the miniature. There we go. Once we have that, we can move on to some specular highlights that are going to help sell the shape of the head a little bit more. So again, I'm thinking about all the planes that are facing downward should catch some of the lighting. For the gold, I want to try to shift everything more towards the green spectrum since gold really can't reflect blue. So another thing that we can do also when doing this sort of work is to put in some more shadows for the light to really pop. That's the same thing that we saw in the beginning, but we can try to work a bit on the top of the figure here as well. I think some of the stuff I did here was maybe a little bit too heavy-handed. So we can have a little bit of it, but not too much. Again, we really need to get rid of this shadow part here. Since we're dealing with light source coming from below, it should not be this dark at all. We would have some bounce lights. So before I show you the final changes to the painting, I really want to tell you a bit about my Patreon. I've recently opened 5 spots for private coaching over on Patreon, and the way that this works is that you send me a picture of your work 24 hours before our appointed session, and I'll then spend some time doing some digital editing, just like the stuff you're seeing in the video now, and we'll then discuss in our session how to apply these changes to the model itself and why I make the changes that I make. Afterwards, you'll then get the file and see the changes layer by layer. This provides a very easy to use step-by-step guide to how to paint the changes that we've discussed. In this way, the feedback is highly personalized and very easy to follow. I really want to thank all of my patrons for their continued support. It really warms my heart that you'd want to contribute to my work in this way. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We're not a big community yet, but I'm sure that will change. Right, so let's get back and see the changes I've made to the model today. As you can see, the OSL is much more clear now, both the green light coming from the bottom and the blue cold light coming from the book. And overall, I think that the painting is much more impactful now. I know that this video was a little bit different, but hopefully you picked up something about miniature painting along the way. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more videos like this one. And until next time, happy painting.